A frightening truth about human nature, one that most people are too afraid to admit. A truth Niccolò Machiavelli, the master strategist, whispered into the ears of lords and kings 500 years ago, and it remains just as true today. Civilized society keeps trying to bury that lesson beneath slogans of compassion, because it unsettles us, because it touches the most fragile place in our conscience. The lesson is this: not everyone can be saved. And more importantly, not everyone wants to be saved. Hearing that, you might react instantly. How can you be so extreme? So we're supposed to turn our backs on everyone? Hold on. Breathe a little slower, and look more deeply into what Carl Jung called the shadow. For some souls, chaos and tragedy aren't merely things they endure. They become a habitat, an identity, and a source of nourishment. Suffering gives them a kind of secondary gain. It exempts them from responsibility, guarantees constant attention, and grants them the power to manipulate the people around them. So when you try to help these people, you are threatening the only toxic source of strength they know. They don't need a hand to lift them onto shore. They need an anchor. If you reach out, they won't climb up. They will cling to your arm, turning your psychological stability into a raft that keeps them drifting afloat, while you are slowly pulled into their disorder. This is the mechanism of psychic vampirism and projection. They cannot tolerate your steadiness and your light, because it contrasts too sharply with the darkness inside them. And so they try to drag you down, to legitimize their own misery. You've met them before. Or maybe, right now, you're exhausted, because of someone like this. They are the drainers. The friend who is always drowning in an endless crisis. A drama staged to capture your attention. The coworker who siphons your spirit dry, yet demands unconditional patience and sacrifice. The family member who takes your money, your energy, your peace, and repays all of it with simmering resentment. The most painful part is this: they maintain the victim costume not because they are powerless, but because it is a sophisticated strategy of power. They fear responsibility, so they shift the weight of their lives onto your shoulders. When you try to heal them, to fix them, you unintentionally reinforce their victim script. You volunteer to become the pillar they lean on, in exchange for a toxic dependence. And then you tell yourself that if you just love enough, if you just sacrifice enough, they will change. You fall into a messiah complex, believing their wounds are your mission, your chance to prove your worth. But Machiavelli would see through that romantic innocence with cold eyes. The person who tries to be good at all times, in all places, is easily worn down among those who are not good. In this power game, compassion without boundaries is not a virtue. It is a serious weakness. It is an open door inviting exploitation. Trainers do not change. They only look for a new supply. When you are too good, you are not only used, you are also despised. And sometimes they hate you for giving, because your generosity highlights their own inadequacy. So learn to step back, not to become cold, but to become clear. Real power is not found in sacrifice. It is found in the ability to protect your own fortress. Other people's weakness is not your responsibility, especially when that weakness has become their way of life. Comillas punto. Listen. In behavioral psychology, this is called vulnerability born of virtue, a psychological blind spot. And this is exactly the weakness emotional parasites, people stubbornly committed to their own fog, will exploit to the fullest. They don't just drain your time and resources, they exploit the deep, almost unconscious need inside you to be the savior. Their goal is to leave you depleted, a hollow shell, trapped in an endless cycle of sacrifice. Today, we are not talking about shallow compassion. We are going to perform a cold, precise dissection of your conscience. We are going to strip away the soft tissue of what's called blind goodness, the disastrous confusion between kindness and compromise. This is where what Jung called the repressed shadow is formed, the fear of saying no, the anxiety that if you don't save others, you will become worthless. And before we go any further, let me ask you one question, real and painfully human. How much have you ever given just to buy the feeling of being needed? Do you remember the moment you realized, I'm living more for other people's problems than for my own life? If you do, leave a comment. Just one sentence, I used to be that way. Because sometimes, speaking it out loud is the first step out of the silent trap you built around yourself. And maybe someone else out there, someone else who is exhausted, will hear that sentence and realize they're not alone. Understand this Machiavellian principle clearly. Setting boundaries is not cruelty. It is resource conservation strategy. It is how you preserve your own energy and power, so you can invest it in the people who truly deserve that emotional investment. When you try to rescue someone who does not want to be rescued, you do something harmful. You hand them the power to keep their victim identity intact. They crave secondary gain, the attention, the sympathy, and the control the victim role provides. It is a psychological zero-sum game. If you are worn out from always being the one who gives everything, only to receive betrayal and pain in return, drop the illusion. This lesson isn't only about survival. It's about repositioning your power on the psychological chessboard. And to do that, you need to recognize one thing, the mechanism of the savior trap. Why do you do it? Why do you rush headlong into a situation that was tangled at the root, when the person inside it doesn't even want to change? That isn't only altruism. It is a profound psychological bargain. You have been programmed to believe your worth is measured by your utility to others. You believe goodness is defined by how much pain you can endure, how much chaos you can absorb, how much burden you can carry for someone else. You confuse endurance with virtue. You think saying no is betrayal, as if refusing once makes you a bad person. Machiavelli would call that strategic self-harm. Because look at the cold truth. Energy is finite. Power is finite. Time is finite. Every time you say yes to an unnecessary demand, you are saying no to your own growth. You are stealing from your own future. And here is the hidden truth inside your shadow ego. The need to be the savior is often a sophisticated disguise for a craving to be accepted and a fear of isolation. You trade your autonomy for a dose of comfort, the temporary praise of those who depend on you. When you pour your resources, your emotions, and your time into a psychological black hole, people who are never satisfied, people who are always looking for ways to drain you, you don't just waste them. You actively finance the collapse of your own life structure. Imagine your life as a ship. Space is limited, supplies are limited, and the clear goal is to keep the journey safe, steady, and directed. If you bring everyone aboard, people who deliberately cause trouble, people who live on drama, people who sabotage quietly, the ship does not become a humanitarian paradise. It becomes overloaded. It loses the discipline needed to pass through stormy days. And then you no longer have the strength to steer. That is why personal salvation and the maintenance of power sometimes require a decisive necessary act. Exclusion, not because you are heartless, but because if you don't protect your ship, you become an accomplice to your own dissolution. This is what we might call therapeutic darkness. Sometimes the deepest act of love is letting go, so the other person must face consequences and learn the lesson themselves. Because there is a paradox. When you rescue too early, you unintentionally plant the seed of learned helplessness. You give them temporary relief, but you take away their chance to rebuild the ability to stand on their own. And the rescuer's motive is not always pure kindness. Sometimes it is a need to feel important, a desire to play the martyr. That is the very place where you become vulnerable to the loop. So who are they? Who are the psychological burdens? You must be clear-headed enough to stop. To step back from dentro de los fraisi. To stop burning your energy on. The first type is the architect of chaos, the person who always carries a storm cloud. They are not merely a victim of fate. They repeat choices that blow everything up, then call it bad luck. Every conversation brings a new tragedy, job loss, breakdowns, disasters, emergencies. At first you feel sorry. You ask, how can one person suffer so much? Then the white knight instinct in you rises. You L&D money, you advise, you connect opportunities. And then it happens again. That's when you see it. The problem isn't only circumstance, it's the pattern. Here's what you need to hear. This kind of bad luck is contagious. Not superstition, but real-world psychology. They lack discipline, lack judgment, and lack deep self-awareness. And the biggest trap. They never take responsibility. They live with an external locus of control. The world hurts them. Fate is against them. Someone is always to blame, but never them. When you try to save an architect of chaos, you invite that chaos into your own life. And when you finally burn out, you understand. You cannot fix someone who prefers to live in the loop of drama. What you need to do is isolate yourself from that pattern, not out of coldness, but out of strategic self-defense. The second type is the bottomless pit, the art of ingratitude. This is the person who constantly demands, consumes your help, and ironically, comes to resent you for it. For them, ingratitude isn't just poor manners. It is a deep wound of malignant entitlement. They do not see your kindness as a gift. They see it as a debt you owe them. And when you help, you create a dangerous dynamic. You become the resource. They become the dependent. Then, deep down, they hate that dependence, hate the feeling of being weaker than you. To reduce cognitive dissonance, they devalue your help and diminish the helper. Want to spot them fast? Use the NO test. Say NO to a small request. Their reaction will tell you everything. If they rage, guilt-trip you, or suddenly go cold, you've seen the truth. You can pour the finest parts of your life into that pit, and they will still ask, is that all? So protect your boundaries, and understand that boundaries do not make you worse, they make you more grown. The third type is the smiling saboteur, the person who doesn't drain you through incompetence, but through hidden envy. Envy is a silent destructive force. This person is often close to you. They cannot tolerate your success, because it exposes their stagnation. And they disguise poison in a protective tone, planting doubt, extinguishing your self-efficacy, making you shrink yourself. In Jung's terms, they project the unlived parts of themselves onto you. Instead of changing, they pull you back down to a level that feels safe for their ego. With this type, a useful principle is the law of concealment. Don't display every victory. Don't share every plan. Don't lay your whole heart and joy on the table for someone who doesn't wish you well. Mystery can sometimes be a shield, and you don't need to prove anything to them. Right here, I want you to pause. Inhale. I know faces are flashing through your mind right now. And there's also a whisper. They need me. Or, I'm different, I can change them. Look straight at that. Sometimes it isn't conscience. It's hubris, a dangerous savior complex. You are not God. You are not tasked with rewriting other people's nature. If you keep plugging your life source into pain machines, built to drain energy, you will empty out. Power is energy. And energy loss will make you lose yourself. Lose clarity. Lose peace. Lose years you could have spent being kind to yourself. And there are 3 more types. More subtle, harder to recognize, because they strike at your fear of isolation, your craving for unconditional approval, and the emptiness you keep trying to fill. The 4th type is the professional victim. Machiavelli taught that power exists in 2 forms: fear and pity. The professional victim doesn't need to make you afraid. They make you feel sorry. Pity is a kind of anesthetic. It touches your empathy and creates an invisible debt. A true victim seeks liberation. A professional victim cultivates pain. For them, pain is capital. They wear their wounds like a crown, demanding you bow before their suffering. And they weaponize fragility. If you dare set a boundary, you get labeled cold, cruel, lacking empathy. You offer solutions, they refuse them. You offer a path, they say it's impossible. Every rejection of a solution is a way of declaring, I need you. And you must keep serving me. Then when you say, I can't carry this anymore, they can flip roles instantly and turn you into the traitor. Don't step into that play. Compassion for this type, without boundaries, turns into prolonged fatigue. Only when the audience leaves does the actor stop performing. The 5th type is the arrogant fool. This is the person who refuses understanding, who loves their outdated view, even when it wrecks their life day after day. They don't lack data, they lack a desire for truth. They deny their shadow because they can't bear the ego collapse. You offer a map. They sneer. You offer reasoning. They pull you into argument loops to wear you out. They don't need to be right. They need you to be exhausted. With this type, Machiavelli suggests a colder approach. Silence. Let reality be their teacher. It doesn't argue. It simply distributes consequences. When the arrogant fool speaks, you don't need to correct. You just nod gently. Interesting. You are protecting your energy, an asset more valuable than any debate. The 6th type is the one who repeats history, the scorpion. This is the person you have forgiven many times. They promise, they swear, they say, last time. And you want to believe, because you want a beautiful ending. But behavioral psychology reminds you, some people don't need you to save them. They need you to be the audience for their loop. When you save them from consequences, you teach them a dangerous lesson. They can hurt others and still be kept. Your forgiveness, in their eyes, can be interpreted as permission. With the scorpion, the hardest lesson is to cut them off, a decisive, clear act, with no ambiguity. You don't have to hate them. You just have to believe them the first time they show you who they are. Stop projecting your conscience onto someone who doesn't live by conscience. Your conscience is an asset. Spend it where good can actually grow. And then, when you look at it all, you'll see a crucial shift, a turning point I want to call the sovereignty shift. The savior sacrifices themselves until all that remains is exhaustion and emptiness. The sovereign is different. they build a lighthouse. They stand firm, they shine, they open the door for those who want to step in, but they do not trade their peace to drag everyone through the same doorway. The people who truly want to be saved will swim toward that light on their own, and the people who stubbornly choose to sink into their own darkness, the heartbreaking truth is, you cannot live their lives for them. But the lighthouse remains. And when you stop trying to rescue those who cannot be rescued, something strange happens. You reclaim the psychic energy you've been bleeding out. You get your time and focus back. Your anxiety settles. You begin building an empire of inner peace. Quiet, not showy, but solid. That is real strength. Not the strength to endure unnecessary suffering, but the strength to choose who is worthy of your most precious resources, your time and your attention. Become the distributor, not the one being drained. This world does not run on pure truth, but on perception. Your task is to create a firm surface, absolute composure, a still lake with no ripples. When you refuse to react, you strip manipulators of the main tool they use. But deep inside, you must know you are learning a difficult art, the art of letting go. Letting go is not indifference. It is cutting the unnecessary emotional cords disguised as responsibility, loyalty, or I have to, comillas punto. And then, when the exploiters are gone, when the noise outside has quieted, you will face a moment that is painfully real. The silent room. And in that silence, you are forced to look in the mirror. This is the moment of bare truth. When there is no one left for you to save, you may realize the person you were trying to protect, help, or change all along was sometimes only a projection of a part of you that has not yet healed. We try to save others, so we don't have to face the truth that we are the ones who need rescuing. You fight weakness out there to avoid the weakness inside. What if that weakness has always lived deep within you, a rejected, repressed part called the shadow? That is the battle you must enter with gentleness toward yourself, with honesty, and with small daily actions, tending to your mental health, choosing your friends wisely, choosing where to place your kindness, and most of all, learning to say no, without apologizing for respecting yourself. If what you've just heard shakes the foundation of your understanding, know this: that is only the surface layer of the truth. And in the modern world, there isn't always room to speak every corner of human psychology without being misunderstood or twisted. Algorithms may not only be distribution tools, sometimes they're also gates that steer attention, feeding the crowd's comfort. But no matter what, the most important part still lies within you, when you face your shadow, ambition, envy, the hunger for control. Not to turn it into something that harms others, but to understand it, manage it, and use it as a source of self-governed strength. You will no longer be so easily led by guilt and calls for endless sacrifice. And if today you only want to take one thing home, take this. Kindness without boundaries turns kindness into a place where others set down their burdens. Kindness with boundaries turns you into a healthy anchor, for yourself, for your family, and for the people who truly want to live better. If you see yourself in this story, leave a comment. What kind of person are you stuck with? You don't have to share details, just name the feeling: tired, guilty, torn, or relieved. I read them. And I believe that when more people dare to be honest with themselves, this community will become a warmer place. Not because everyone sacrifices, but because everyone knows how to live kindly, while still keeping themselves intact.